So we are coming off a very busy week for IndyCar as well as this channel. Not only was it content days for the 2025 NTT IndyCar series, but we also had the presentation of the Baby Borg Warner Trophy to Roger Penske and Joseph Newgarden in Detroit, which of course, if you're not already aware, I was up and able to cover. So we've got a couple of things to clean up from Detroit, as well as talk about the 2027 IndyCar, which was kind of my primary focus of content day since, well, we haven't tested and most of the drivers haven't even been in the cars since Nashville of last year. So to look forward to the future, I think, is extremely important because, to me, the new chassis is the single most important story in IndyCar racing for the next 2 years because it's something that's, I think, has an opportunity to move the sport forward in a meaningful way. And that's something that's super important. But let's talk a couple of things with Detroit first. I actually got an opportunity not only to sit down and speak with Roger Penske, you'll hear more from him later on in this video, but I also got to speak to the CEO of Borg Warner, the incoming CEO. His name is Joe Fadool, and Borg Warner is an extremely important part of IndyCar racing and its history. It's always interesting to check in with them. So let's head over to me in the past in Detroit. So we're here with Joe Fadool, the incoming CEO of Borg Warner, and I believe 100% that this is the greatest trophy in sports. This is the thing that I've dreamed about, for 31 years of my life. So just talk for a second about how important this trophy and this partnership is with the Indianapolis 500 to Borg Warner.
Yeah, well, David, I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is one of the greatest trophies, probably the greatest trophy in all of sports. We've been associated with the trophy since the beginning. 1936 was the first year, and since then it's just been a constant drive toward innovation and technology and more speed, more power, more safety. But for us, it's just a great corollary to show off some of our technology, but also just be a part of an amazing sport with a lot of amazing people.
You mentioned showing off of that technology. There's a couple of different avenues that your technology is involved in the Indianapolis 500. Not only is every turbocharger in the race, whether it's a Chevy or a Honda, a Borg Warner turbocharger, but I think there's something really cool with the pace car this year that I'd kind of like you to fill me in on.
Right. So as you know, all the Indy cars are either supplied by Honda or Chevy engines, and each one of them has two Borg Warner turbos driving up to 750 horsepower. Through a 2.2-liter engine. So talk about fantastic. What we're super excited about this year is the launch of the Corvette, the ZR1. For the first time, every ZR1 is going to be equipped with two very high-tech Borg Warner turbochargers, which help it deliver that 1,000 horsepower. So we're super excited.
We love that number of 1,000 horsepower. I think you and I.
Sounds great, doesn't it?
100%. So, obviously a special day today to not only present Joseph Newgarden with his second Baby Borg in a row, but Roger Penske with his 20th. Just talk about that excellence shown by both driver and team to get that and how important that is to kind of showcase the Borg Warner technology.
Sure. For us, it's such an honor to be a part of this whole thing. And Joseph is a great example of just being at the top of your game, and he did it 2 years in a row. He's one of only 6 drivers in the history to have back-to-back wins. So, and last year, if you saw the race, it was probably one of the most exciting races in the last 20 years. So for us, it's just great to be a part of. And, extending that to the whole Penske team, they surround themselves with just the best and the brightest to win. And this is their 20th win, which they're really proud of. And, we have to stop for a moment and just reflect on that. What does it mean to win 20 Indianapolis 500s? Like, that's just incredible. And they do it, like many other success stories. It's hard work. It's great people. It's continuously improving year upon year, and we can't be happier for them.
The best and brightest. I think that describes that beauty behind us. Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Someone else I got to catch up with in Detroit, not named Roger Penske, was Joseph Newgarden. Now, you'll hear from him later in this video on the 2027 chassis, But I also wanted to talk to Joseph about that Fox commercial that everybody's talking about. So let's hear from Joseph. Well, we're here with the man of the hour in more ways than one, Joseph Newgarden. Of course, I guess we'll start with the main part of the night, which is that you received your baby Borg today, your second one. Is it any less special?
Oh, no. It never gets old. I mean, you never get used to it. Indy is, I don't need to tell people that know what the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is and try and describe the significance. It is the greatest spectacle in racing for a reason. When you win that race, it just changes the magnitude and feel of it for you personally. It's already a big deal when you're there. It's a big deal for anybody that's there, but when you win it, you just feel that magnitude of the race even more so. So it's great to be here tonight, stand next to Roger Penske, to have had a career where I've got to drive for Roger and win 2 Indy 500s with him. Very, very thankful. I'm looking forward to this year. We don't want to stop. I'm kind of bouncing between like greed and appreciation. Like, I'm so appreciative we've won 2, but now I want more. So I'm trying to keep that balance, but excited to come back to Indy.
Yeah, we discovered this week that you've got a better chin than Tom Brady. That ad was just, I thought, absolutely perfect. I mean, it was exactly, I think it hit the right notes. I think it was right there where I think you might be able to appeal to some younger demographic people. Talk about the process of filming that ad, because I think it was Pato that said it was almost like filming a movie.
Yeah, I mean, look, we were working with their A-stars. I mean, like, this is the A-team. It's the best that they have, and they're very good. Very, very good at what they do. And I think Fox has got to be one of the best partners that we could ever dream of. Look, Fox, the most important thing is Fox understands what IndyCar was, they understand what IndyCar should be, and they understand what IndyCar can be. And that is so important to have a partner that believes in you and understands the lens that people need to see it in. We've talked about IndyCar like it's this hidden gem forever. It shouldn't be a hidden gem. It was a household name, not that long ago. And it's got the best racing on the planet. And, they need to build stars. They need to build storylines. You got to make people feel something. You got to give them a reason to show up and to tune in. And I think Fox does that very well. And they care about our sport, and they're going to do a great job for us. So, you're going to see everybody beaming with excitement because we've got a great partner behind us, and I really think they're going to be transformative to what we do in 2025. But of course, one of the big stories I was chasing last week was details on the 2027 IndyCar regulations. We keep wanting to say chassis, but I think I need to say regulations more because, it's more than just a chassis. It always is more than just a chassis when you change the rules. And there are a lot more factors that go into that than just, hey, it's a new car. I think we oversimplify it when we say those sort of things because it really can be or make for broad sweeping change in IndyCar racing. I mean, if you just look back to the DW12, when they introduced that car, well, that came with 2 new manufacturers in addition to Honda. Now, I get Lotus didn't stay around for very long, but it's one more manufacturer than we have today. And if you look at something like IMSA GTP, it seems like we introduce 1 or 2 manufacturers into that category per year, and that's not even counting the hypercars over in the World Endurance Championship. So I got an opportunity to actually go one-on-one with Roger Penske. The entire interview is already up on my channel, but I'm going to play this clip, which I was able to ask Roger directly about what is in store for the new technical regulations.
Well, we're hoping we're doing wind tunnel testing now. We're doing engine, looking at our engine. It's about a hybrid version, higher voltage, more power. The chassis will be lighter. The car will be lighter. People are saying it's heavier. Well, it won't be. And we've taken safety as the first criteria. And then it's drivability and obviously performance.
So you just heard Roger. I want to break down some of the things that he said because I think he broke a lot of things. I mean, there are things that we've heard about in rumor and conjecture, but Roger said them himself in that interview clip. So the design is already in the wind tunnel. So some of the things that we've heard that the design is not finalized or there's room to change it, I don't know if that's necessarily 100% true. It would seem as though, especially, even if it's a scaled model in the wind tunnel right now, you're pretty far down the line in the design process at that point, or at least committing to that particular design once you've got it in the wind tunnel. So it sure seems like this chassis is probably a lot closer and further along than a lot of us maybe believe. The big key, I think, that Roger pointed out, and I think he mentioned it for a reason, is the fact that the hybrid's going to be at a higher voltage and thus produce more power. And reading between the lines, I think that this will be Roger's pitch to auto manufacturers that might want to sign up as a third manufacturer. Now, that is very much kind of the Formula One business model, to have an internal combustion engine that is not, or perhaps 60 to 70% of the power, and then the rest of it comes from the electric motor. That sounds a lot like Formula One. So I would say, in terms of thinking about what manufacturer would want to sign up for that, I guess it would depend if it is indeed going to end up being a spec engine. The cost would be significantly lower than Formula One, but that's up to. But I think that, to me, is the big takeaway and a big point of emphasis who we're going to continue to hear out of Penske Entertainment. Chassis will be lighter, with safety number one priority, drivability second, and performance third. Not something that we're really surprised to hear, although it was kind of interesting to hear Roger take a shot at some people who said the chassis is going to continue to be heavy. But yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily a surprise. That should absolutely be the goal, that it's going to be a lighter and safer car. Although it's interesting that performance is last, so don't be surprised if the car doesn't perform as strongly as the IR18 right out of the box. So before we speak to the drivers, I do want to make a bit of a confession, and something. I didn't sign no damn NDA, so I can say this. I've seen the car. I've seen the 2027 render that I think everybody else has seen or not everybody else. In fact, it's kind of funny. You're going to hear one driver that I specifically asked say they haven't seen it, and Pato O'Ward also said he had not seen it. So I guess not everybody has seen it, although I have. And if you were part of the DL500 Club, you already knew that. Good opportunity to join, by the way. So here's my take on the car. It's definitely evolutionary. Make no mistake about that. It's not as close to the DW12 as the team owners seem to make it seem in that Racer article. But make no mistake, it's very much a current Dallara IndyCar. Okay, so I think that the fans, let's say IndyCar puts this render out on their social media tomorrow, right? I think the fans would love it. I think the fans would go, well, that's great. That's awesome. We love IndyCar. And because it's very much the same sort of thing that you've been given. If you are an IndyCar fan right now, you are not going to be offended by it. In fact, you're probably going to like it a lot. But here's the thing, and the thing that I do agree with the team owners on, is that while I think the design would be great and very appealing in 2026, maybe 2027, and you're pushing the limit in like 2028, it's going to age very quickly. And that's just the way it always goes with every race car. There are some new things on it. There are some very big differences versus the DW12. For example, sure looks to me, from what I've seen, that the car has 18-inch wheels and tires on it, which would be a pretty massive departure from what we're used to in IndyCar. It's got LED panels, the return of those. Appears like there's like hybrid or possibly fuel, and definitely a position panel once again, something that I think everybody from a spectator standpoint has missed since they got rid of them. So there are some new things, and the drivers will mention that the racing is fine. You're going to hear that quite a bit, and they shouldn't change too much, because if you mess with the racing product, you might take away something that's great with IndyCar. And I would agree that as a whole, majority of the races, maybe, not all of the races are perfect. There's no doubt about it, but you're never going to have perfect racing at every racetrack. But yes, objectively, the racing is good in IndyCar. But here's the thing. I think at this point, IndyCar has kind of like hit the ceiling on how many people they're going to bring in to the sport with good racing, with the car being the same. And I mean, here at the end of the day, we're entering the sixth season. I actually can't believe this. The sixth season of the cars from 2020 to 2025 and then into 26, the cars will be exactly the same as they have been this entire time. That's 8 seasons if you count the 2 prior IR18 seasons before they added the aero screen, which obviously was a big visual change. But for me, this is something that's unacceptable for top level racing. And it really should never happen again, because I think IndyCar's lost not just a step, I think they've lost 2 or 3 steps by not changing and by not moving the sport forward in that time period. And, I don't think we talk a lot about what not to screw up with a new car, but I don't think we ever talk about the car potentially expanding the appeal of IndyCar racing. And I understand that's what the team owners kind of were talking about with the going really bonkers with the looks, but I kind of pointed out that, if every car looks the same and they all look bonkers, you have a chance of turning people off, which I agree is a big thing. So I think there is a balancing act there. But my opinion is IndyCar right now has racing fans who really like certain drivers and really like the style of racing that IndyCar puts on. But I don't know if there's that many more people out there who are willing to come in with IndyCar the way that it is. I think you need to appeal more to gearhead race fans, which I think largely at one point were interested in IndyCar racing, and they have since moved on to Formula One and sports cars and sprint cars and pretty much any other form of the sport that has a bit more to bite into and be interested in on the technology side over the past 15, 20 years. And I think you also need to make sure that this formula in 2027 is appealing to auto manufacturers. And I don't think there's been nearly enough emphasis on that. There's not nearly been enough spoken about, and it's probably something I should have asked Roger about. What are you going to do to make this platform appealing to manufacturers? And so that's difficult. And we need to not only know what this 2027 car is going to be, but I think we need to know what IndyCar is going to do in 2030. Because I think by the time you're 3 years into this new design, the fans are already going to have seen everything. The teams will have figured the car out, and we're going to be right back to the status quo. So that's kind of my piece. But of course, throughout the content days, as well as in Detroit, I was able to ask a lot of the drivers their opinions. Contrast that with what I said and contrast that with what Roger Penske said, and I think you're going to have a pretty good idea of kind of where the sport is and what folks are thinking about the new designs need to be.
One of the things I think we're all kind of, anticipating is the new car, hopefully coming in 2027. I've been asking a lot of some of the more seasoned drivers like yourself about, what are the boxes that Nat needs to check to take IndyCar to the next level, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what it needs to be to move IndyCar forward.
Well, it's a complex problem. Careful what you wish for. You can't have everything. I think they're doing a really good job. We've seen the car. Most of the drivers have seen the car. They've been in the meetings. IndyCar's been pretty straightforward with the development and trying to get input and feedback. They've got a great engineering team involved in this. And they're building a new chassis. They're building a new integrated system that's going to be powering the car in conjunction with the ICE. And I think they're headed in the right direction. Probably from my standpoint, weight's the most important thing right now. When you look at the current formula, the car's just gotten heavier. As much as we can keep the weight down, I think the better. It's good for safety. It takes inertia off the car when you're traveling at 240 plus miles per hour, hitting a wall. So that's one major ingredient to the weight. But also, I think just the maneuverability, the raceability of the car is always going to be a little bit better when it's balanced. And I think we've probably tipped over that too heavy of a side right now. So, tires as well. We could talk for hours about this, but everything just comes back in line when you get the weight in the right spot. And so that's a point that I've hammered home to the engineering team, and they've taken this in. I can say this all day though. You know how difficult it is to get the car lighter? It just costs more and more money, and it's more complex. It's very difficult to do. You look at Formula One right now, I think none of the drivers in Formula One like the size and the weight of the car. And so they've got a problem where they're trying to shrink the cars and take the weight off, and it's not easy for them either. But where I'm going with all this is that, IndyCar has a good trajectory on what they need to bring for 2027 to bring everybody a new car, a new platform, and have it applicable to most manufacturers, not only that are here, whether it's Chevrolet or it's Honda or it's new manufacturers that want to come and be a part of the sport. So I think the timing is great. I think everyone is doing their job. There's more to be excited about than to be mad about right now. There's such good things on the horizon. The series is in a good spot, and I think we can get to 2027 and have a great new car.
Authentic, fast, and loud, I think we've got to stick with that. I don't think we need to fall into the trap of electrification too much and things like that. To me, I think IndyCar, if you continue to buck the trend of the pattern of conservative sort of thinking when it comes to electrification, all that stuff, like has been pushed over the years. Not really sure that's the pattern of the future. Hybrid certainly is. And we see that, car sales at our dealerships. We see what the demand is. We see the brands that have been successful with it. And I think if you stay true to that, you can make a lot of horsepower. You can make a very efficient car. And you can make a sexy looking race car. And, ultimately with horsepower comes noise. Wouldn't be afraid of being loud. When I was a kid, that's what it was all about. The sights, the sounds, the smells of racing are something most other sports don't have. And so we got to keep to that.
I have to weigh my answer to not get in trouble. Here's the thing, and I've actually talked to quite a few people at length about this. There's some people that have the belief that it needs to be this super futuristic, crazy looking, ultra modern car, right? There's other people that's like, okay, it needs to be this super light, high horsepower thing that does like track records everywhere. Okay. Ultimately, what I think needs to be done is we already have, and I don't think it's a debate, we already have the best product on track that exists globally. So to reinvent the wheel, I don't think is something in my mind that needs to be done. I think it needs to be an evolution of the car we've had. Obviously, technology has developed, materials have developed. We have added a lot onto the DW12. So integrating all of that is going to have benefits from a cost standpoint, from a safety standpoint, from a workability standpoint for the mechanics, to have things that, fit and flow and work a bit better together. But ultimately, I don't think we need to do anything that's beyond what we already do, because I think what we already do is pretty good. It just needs to be an updated version of what we have. So that's my opinion.
I think it needs to be a little bit better on the super speedways than what we have right now. The racing at the front is great at Indy, and that's where the cameras are most of the time, so people don't notice it. But a little bit further back, it gets really hard to overtake. Whereas I think that's kind of what the DW12 was great at, from watching the races and hearing the guys that have run in that talk about it. So that I think that can be a little bit better. And ideally, I don't think the road and street courses need to be fixed. But ideally on the short ovals, you have it where we don't need tire deg to make the racing a factor that way. It make it where the racing is good either way. And the DW12 was really good at that, because it had good racing with tire deg at Milwaukee or Iowa, and it had good racing at tracks that wouldn't provide that. And so for me as a driver, that's kind of, it's more oval focused, because I don't think we have a problem overtaking on road and street courses, but some of the ovals can be a little difficult.
I don't know. I haven't heard much about the whole new formula or what's coming, or if anything's coming. I know there's a car supposedly happening in 27, but
Have you seen it?
nobody's even asked me about it, so I have no idea. I wouldn't even know. Yeah, I wouldn't know if it's going to have 2 wheels or 3 wheels or.
Well, so what would you improve versus the current car? If you were developing a new chassis, what would your wish list be?
The weight. I'm sure everybody says that, but that I think will make raceability a lot better. it will, give the tire some breathing window as well. The look definitely needs to be updated. I think as far as the driver situation, I don't even know if they're going to introduce power steering. Like those are some things that, even junior categories have now where we don't, and that would help, especially with a lot of wrist and hand injuries. So on a safety side, I think that would be pretty big. You don't want to change too much because the fundamentals work really well. It's a great racing series. I think we're very lucky to do what we do. I would like to see more power. The car's kind of degraded over the years as far as if you look for a power to weight situation. The first car I drove in kart was 1,000 horsepower and probably, several hundred pounds lighter. So if they could get back to a faster car, it would be kind of cool. A lot of circuits we go to are only maybe a couple of seconds quicker than in an Indy Next car. So, yeah.
Something that I remember you mentioning probably a year or two ago, specifically about the super speedway racing, is that the current car is maybe too aero efficient. Could you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Everybody's in the same box, right? Like you kind of, even, if you're going to, there's just not much adjustability. I think, the days of, obviously the extreme was the body kit, the aero kit days where you had a lot of pieces that you could put on or take off. And I think that made the variables much bigger between how you started the race to where cars kind of finished at the end. I remember a Texas race and everybody was laughing at us starting at the front, in the middle of the pack with a loaded downforce on. We nearly lapped the whole field, but, they're like, oh, you got way too much downforce, it's going to be so slow. But that was kind of cool because everybody was on a different kind of strategy as far as, downforce versus drag. So, I think some changeability would be kind of nice. Some areas maybe for a little bit of development. At the minute you can't do anything really apart from dampers and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of different windows. But again, I have no idea what the car is even going to be.
Something that you mentioned about the oval racing, and something that I remember Scott Dixon bringing up at one point was, I think Scott said about the current car that it's almost like too efficient aerodynamically. Is that kind of the sense that you have? Is that's something that could be changed?
Yeah, I mean, the efficiency is somewhat of a problem, but I think it's also.
Dentists hate when you do this, but they can't stop you. This new $100
efficiency is
changed.
Yeah, I mean, the efficiency is somewhat of a problem, but I think it's also kind of works in some ways too.
It's almost like Scott. Something that you mentioned about the oval racing, and something that I remember Scott Dixon bringing up at one point was, I think Scott said about the current car that it's almost like too efficient aerodynamically. Is that kind of the sense that you have? Is that's something that could be changed?
Yeah, I mean, the efficiency is somewhat of a problem, but I think it's also kind of works in some ways too. The more downforce you add to a car, especially over the top, the better the slipstreaming is going to be, and the better the passing is going to be in that aspect, and you'll be able to follow a little bit closer. So that's the whole thing for me is getting to add downforce. We did that at Gateway, and look how good the racing was this year. It's a lot better. I mean, I drove from 25th to 4th. I wasn't going to be able to do that the year before, but the second lane opened up, and so something that's I guess more efficient over the top of the car with the wings is better than more efficient underneath. And a lot of people are saying like, oh, well, the dirty air is going to be worse and whatnot, and it might be a little bit. But the more downforce we have, the more that's going to open up the second lane. So if you're not behind a car in the second lane, it doesn't matter about how disruptive the car in front is. And it'll never be a problem on super speedways. It'll be more of a problem on short ovals if that does become a problem. But seeing how Gateway raced, I don't think that's the case.
So lots of different opinions, and now it's time for yours. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the 2027 IndyCar design, what you would like to see, what kind of regs you would like to see. Should they stay conservative or should they go way out of the ballpark? Let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.